Hi, everybody, and welcome to our fireside chat, an exclusive Swish event entitled From Virtual to Reality, Why Brands, Cities and Governments Must Have a Presence in the Metaverse. I'm Adam Flinter, Managing Partner for International Markets at the Golden Equator Group. I'm thrilled to be your host and your moderator for today's fireside chat. Today, we are privileged to have with us two esteemed speakers, Sam Huber, the CEO of LandVault, and Vitaliy Nechaev, Head of Metaverse at Vostok VR. As we dive into the importance of building a presence in the Metaverse, let's start by getting to know our speakers and their respective companies better. But before we commence, I'd just like to provide you with a brief introduction to Swish. Swish is an invite-only business community app. It's all about empowering the next generation of business leaders with the right tools to improve their productivity, enrich their networks, and enhance their learning opportunities. Please note that we have allocated time for Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any burning questions, please drop them in the comment box, and we will work our way through as many of them as we can after our speakers have weaved their magic. For those of you who have yet to get invited on Swish, please scan the QR code or drop your email into the comment box, and we will be able to send an invite to you. Okay, so without further ado, we can start the panel session. And I'd like to start by introducing both of the panelists and maybe getting them to introduce themselves. So joining us first is Vitaliy from Vostok VR. So Vitaliy, can you just spend a couple of minutes introducing yourself and Vostok VR?
This is not right. Thank you, Adam, for this introduction. So yes, my name is Vitaliy. I live in Singapore. This week I'm in 11 years, so I'm quite invested in this region. And I work in virtual and augmented. I started my career in virtual and augmented reality about 8 years ago. And we evolutionize, we move our business from some basic 360 video project. Then we were invested by MediaCorp. Then we done more and more projects region-wide, including Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. And then we start doing interactive VR. And we all were excited about Metaverse when this concept was announced and presented, because for us, a virtual reality company, it gives a clear pathway of where we can go within next maybe a few years. Because I can give you a short example, because many people asking like what Metaverse is, because we done like 100+ projects region-wide, including Singapore, including Malaysia, Thailand. And the problem about this project, although they are generating money and they are quite successful and they are creating a big, let's say, activation for the audiences, the problem is they all isolated. So for instance, we done the project for Samsung, we done the project for Subaru, we done the project for Singapore Airlines, but these all projects are isolated. So what Metaverse is a final destination or final vision where we can connect all these experiences, and that will bring the ultimate value for each of the customers, because they can go to check what Singapore Airlines destination are. Then they can check let's say Subaru and do some test drive of their cars. They can go to check the latest Samsung or Apple smartphones and so on. So it's all one unified environment. And I think the next step of where we see it is not just digital on your mobile, on your laptop, but it's beyond that, when we use in mixed reality glasses and when we can mix the digital and real and integrate it in our everyday life. Like we have it mobile, but it's attached to our palm, it is attached to our hand, and we can have it beyond that, we can have it in the real world. So I think this is the ultimate promise of the Metaverse.
Thank you for that, Vitaliy. Actually, going back one step, because I think there's always the elephant in the room question around various types of blockchain and Web3 technology. So why for you the Metaverse? How did you really get into it? I know that there's a story you tell about your daughter, and I think that that's an interesting anecdote to kind of share about why your bet is on the Metaverse as kind of one of the emerging technologies.
Thank you. That's a very good question because many people ask me like, whether is it the next big thing? And I should tell them yes, but within next 7 to 10 years. And if you ask like, why such a timeline? I would suggest you to look at the age chart for like who exist in Metaverse users. Because if you didn't know, there are different metaverses available. I mean, it's not truly metaverse, but basically there are different metaverses, including Roblox, Fortnite, Sandbox, Decentraland, and there are like maybe about 10 to 15 smaller ones, and about 500 million people, 500 millions using it. And if you ask yourself or you ask your friends, like how many of your friends using it, I should say probably a very minimum number of people, mostly because we are too old for the metaverse at this age. Because majority of the kids, or like majority of the people using metaverse nowadays, out of this 500 million, about 70% are within the age 8 to 12. So that makes this prediction and makes complete sense, because in 7-10 years, these kids will join the labor market. These kids will become the active part and business participation part of the market. And they will use the interface they're familiar with. So if we are using the internet, if you're using the website, these kids will use the metaverse as the next interface, as the ultimate interface for them. I don't really like this description, but sometimes people can compare metaverse as a 3D internet or immersive internet. And I think these kids, they will get used to the immersive internet, and this will become de facto standard within the next 5 to 7 years.
Great. Thanks for that, Vitaliy. And also joining us on what is unarguably the best looking panel session I've ever been a part of is Sam Huber, who's the CEO of LandVault. Thank you for joining us, Sam. Maybe you can introduce yourself, LandVault, and a little bit about the history of your journey into the metaverse as well, because I think you're quite an OG in the space. So.
Well, thank you, Adam. Great to be here. Great to be in Singapore. Yeah, so I run a company called LandVault. We've been going on for about 5 years. Before that, we were operating under a different name, but the idea has always been the same, which was to bring brands into virtual worlds. Initially with gaming, and then last year we pivoted into the metaverse. So today LandVault has about 160 people globally, mainly builders, architects, designers, and we are basically have two sides to our business. One being the creative side. We help big brands and now even governments enter the metaverse by building full-on experiences, and we also build technology to support those experiences. And that technology could be analytics, for example, to measure what's happening in the experience, monetization technologies to drive revenue through e-commerce or advertising. And now we're also building our own protocol, Matera, which is a way to deploy content on chain and on the web. And the idea has always been to create this new phase of the internet. As Vitaliy says, we see the metaverse as a 3D, more immersive internet, which would be used by and large across many use cases, from marketing to digital tourism and many other use cases.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Very impressive growth journey as well, and I think gaming seems to be a common pathway into the metaverse as well. So actually, it's touching on some of your last points in your introduction. Like part of this panel session is around governments and cities. So I think we can kick off and kind of dive a little bit deeper into the government side of it, because I think that there are governments and cities and authorities that are actually dabbling in the metaverse. So as opposed to a traditional digital platform, how do you see the metaverse shaping the way that governments work? So is it more interacting with citizens, or is it tourism, or is it a mix of different things? I'll ask you, Sam, first.
So there's multiple use cases, I guess, that governments could be looking for, and by and large, the main one is tourism. This is the the goal is to promote the country to the rest of the world, and what best than, you know, a 3D immersive experience to do that. And that's really connected to our vision at LandVault. We believe that the metaverse should be the next best thing to reality. Obviously, real life, real events, real connections, nothing digital will ever come close to that. The metaverse is not meant to replace the digital world, but it could be the next best thing. So if you cannot be there, if you cannot visit this foreign country, if you cannot attend this concert because you're just not there, then the next best thing should be to consume that in the metaverse. Currently, the next best thing is videos. And we believe that the metaverse could be that layer in between real life and videos in a way when it comes to actually immersion into an experience. So for countries, you know, that really try to promote themselves to the rest of the world, it's an incredible channel to be able to do that, to showcase the culture in ways that just picture and videos cannot, have virtual events, and, you know, just give a preview of what the country has to offer to people who might be interested to visit but are not quite sure. And we found a lot of the interest in the Middle East right now, and Southeast Asia also being a huge region for this, which is why LandVault has, you know, relocated or expanded operations in the Middle East. I'm personally based in Dubai most of the time, and, you know, exploring also Singapore, Southeast Asia, because we feel like this is a very exciting region for that type of use cases.
Thank you. Vitaliy, do you have a different perspective? I know you also work in the Middle East with the Saudi government on various projects, but you're very active in Southeast Asia. So how do you see governments and cities and organizations such as, you know, the more authoritative administrative kind of organizations being able to work in the metaverse?
I see two pathways. One is, Sam mentioned, it's for tourists. Because I have lots of friends based in Singapore, especially since Singapore has reopened. And how cool would it be just not to explain them where to go, like how to go, but maybe to download 3 days crash course and like mixed reality experience, which you can guide them through different locations in Singapore, tell more about the history, the historical background, maybe show the pictures, or like create some time machine to show them like how it used to be like 20, 30 years ago. Because living in Singapore, kind of you appreciate it, but I'm always excited to look back and see how it used to be like 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the second pathway, we had a discussion yesterday with one of Business Connection. I won't tell you the country, but they were seriously considering to do a blockchain election, because the main problem of election nowadays, it's not in every country, but in some countries, it's not transparent. And I mean, my personal problem is it takes so much time in order to count the votes. I want to see the immediate response, like we calculated, we counted, and this is the result. And not just for votes, but to be realistic to more social projects. For instance, in Saudi, we had a discussion as they launch in lots of different mega projects, like huge, large developments. But the problem is that when you announce the first project, everyone excited. When you announce your 10, 20 project, no one really cares. So what they want to increase the engagement. So they want to allow people in virtual and augmented and mixed reality to travel to the location they're going to build in like 10, 20, 30 years from now. So people can understand better what's the value proposition, what kind of brands, and probably even some people like living in other cities, like international cities, they can plan their relocation like 10 to 20 years. And I think when we combine this blockchain election and this mega project, mega cities, so citizens can actively participate in the life of the government of the countries. And I think this is one of the promises of Metaverse we see.
Okay, that's interesting. I think that e-government is probably a very unexplored area for the metaverse. I think a lot of governments are still struggling with the first phase of e-government, but they are actively using blockchain. So I guess that is a step in the right direction. So actually touching upon that, so Sam, as he mentioned, is very active in Dubai, has moved his business to Dubai. Dubai is arguably the leader in this space, although Singapore might try to disagree, but it has a metaverse strategy. I think they announced last year that they want to attract 1,000 metaverse related businesses and create 40,000 related jobs in the industry by 2030. Vitaliy now splits his time between Singapore and Saudi. In Dubai, they have just announced Dubai International Financial Center has announced a big metaverse project, and there's also an official metaverse accelerator. So as we're based in Southeast Asia and the metaverse is technically borderless, perhaps you could walk us through a little bit about what's exciting in the Middle East, because I think the Gulf is kind of where a lot of metaverse investment is taking place. And I think it'd be great for other people in the rest of Asia and anyone who's watching outside to be able to kind of understand the feel and the excitement and what's really happening on the ground there. Sam?
I think it's related to what we discussed before around tourism and more generally attracting the best talent to the region, right? This is pretty much what the Middle Eastern countries are trying to do. They know that at least in the UAE, that this is not a huge population. A lot of the skills, a lot of the economy is powered by the expats, and for this they need to bring the best talent, the best people, and they're also investing a lot in technology, which they see as a future where their economy will move from mainly oil to technology. So for this they need to really bring the best talent, and for this they need to figure out the best way to advertise the country. So Dubai, the UAE it's just been very, very good at marketing generally, at promoting what they're doing, at having those incredible landmarks and events and buildings, and creating this really active economy, a very exciting economy for people to join. And again, the metaverse, they see that as a perfect way to showcase that to the rest of the world, because billions of people have not been to Dubai, to the UAE, because of just distance and travels. So for them, it's a perfect showcase, and that's really one of the main reasons why they're moving in the space. The second would be more related to actually creating new business avenues, monetizing digital worlds, and basically creating this kind of digital twin on top of the real world.
Vitaliy, what about Saudi? What is the focus with the Saudi government? Is it also tourism, or as you mentioned previously in your last answer, is there a citizen engagement going on as well?
I think for Saudi, one of the key opportunity is tourism for sure, because they expect to grow the number of the tourists they attract in the country from I think from 30 million to 100 to 150 millions. Don't be surprised, that's including some internal tourists and so on. And because again, Saudi, it's the place of religious pilgrimage. But from other side, as you know, the Saudi has this Vision 2030. So basically the country going to redesign and redefine itself within the next 7 to 10 years. And part of it is the relocation of businesses from countries like Dubai or Doha or Bahrain to Riyadh. Because if you want to work with Saudi government, you need to have your office, your company, your headquarters based in Riyadh. So that's a huge change that's going to happen within the next 1 to 2 years. And what I see that metaverse, we see more requests, aside from tourism, we see more requests from businesses who wants to create a digital twin or digital copy of their factory, want to educate like what's business opportunities, business potential. And also we're discussing few, I would say, innovative business models when the government wants to create a metaverse free zone in a country. So you can open your like a small, medium business or enterprise in the country without having a physical office. This is quite interesting in new concept, but I mentioned if you can start opening a business in places like the Lion or like Neom, without actually maybe 5-10 years before it was actually built, I think that will attract the very innovative and very interesting companies.
Okay, interesting, because I think it's interesting to see that the cities that are very commercially minded, shall we say, like the new Saudi cities, your Dubai's, the Gulf cities, and Singapore, are the ones that are kind of embracing the metaverse. So, and it's one of the kind of arguments that a lot of people have against the metaverse. It's not commercially viable at the moment. We can touch on that a little bit later, but I thought, there was a commonality you can see. So you can see maybe Dubai, Singapore, Shanghai, Seoul, who's announced a very large metaverse initiative. But you see the pattern here. It's Asian cities. It's Asian cities who are out and up front in terms of pushing the boundaries in engagement in the metaverse. I don't know if you know the answer or you have an idea, but any ideas why is Asia so far ahead of Europe in the US? Some US cities like Miami, etc., might say that they're doing some progressive things, but generally speaking, if there was a top 10 list of cities who are doing things in the metaverse progressively, it's most of them going to be Asian cities.
It may sound controversial, but I feel that countries and cities like Singapore or Dubai or Riyadh, they're not taking things for granted. So they understand. It took some time, maybe, and they are highly developed within the last 20 to 30 to 40 years. So they understand that this state of success is not permanent, is not guaranteed. And currently we see some big changes happening in Europe, in US, like all over the world. And these cities and these countries, they do understand that being innovative and creating some innovative services and attracting the top talents, they can de facto become the leaders in their respective region. So I think it's the right strategy. And Metaverse is just part of the bigger vision, because Metaverse is the digital part, but we're talking about artificial intelligence and some other parts. So I think this is the right direction for the cities. And again, I see part of it, why I relocated to Asia, because my friend, he's chief executive of a very big gaming company, and I won't name him, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, he told me, Vitaliy, if you want to have if you're old, you go to Europe. If you're young, you need to go to Asia, just because all the money, all the opportunities are here.
And also, Sam, because obviously you've relocated your business to Asia as well, to West Asia in Dubai. Is there a difference you see between, is it mentality or the government backing or the funding available or the adoption that caused you to move into Asia?
I mean, the main thing was the vision that the government had in the UAE specifically about Metaverse. I went there in October for just a business trip, and I was really impressed with this clear vision to create 40,000 jobs in the metaverse, to have the gross metaverse product replace their GDP eventually. So it was just very exciting, even though a lot of it is very futuristic. It was actually quite refreshing to see that kind of initiative at the country level, and the government saying clearly, this is what we want to dominate. We want to be the Silicon Valley of Web3 or of the metaverse. And I've never heard that before. I've done business here in the US, in Europe, and while the ecosystems of those places are a lot bigger than the Middle East when it comes to startups and development culture and all of that, it was really interesting to see that vision, and it felt that this was a country that was almost run like a company, right, with a clear vision, and this is what we're going to do. And then I guess the next layer was, how are they going to execute this? How are they going to create all these jobs? And for this, they need to bring companies that have found success in other parts of the world. So, we were quite I guess, an exciting venture for Dubai to relocate there. And yeah, we've done that, and now we're hiring locally. We brought a few people from the team as well, and we're creating our sales hub across the Middle East for now, and I'm obviously exploring opportunities here in Singapore as well.
Okay, great. And don't worry about being controversial, Vitaliy. We like controversial. So, but I think it's always an interesting discussion, because there does seem to be quite a clear divide between the approach of governments in Asia versus the approach of governments in the West to blockchain Web3 in general, as well as the metaverse. So before we move on to kind of like the more commercial side of metaverse, I just want to ask you guys, like, so you're discussing and you're both working with governments and government agencies and government bodies. What is the number one thing a government or a city or some kind of local authority should think about before they dive headfirst into the metaverse? And what's the first thing they should probably do to take action?
I mean, I would say, like anyone jumping into anything, it's really about utility, right? Why do you need that? Why do you want to build that? You know, we've now done, I think, over 200 projects, mainly for brands, and now, you know, growing into government projects. And some of these brands are, you know, big Fortune 500 companies, the MasterCard of this world, the Heineken, the Red Bull, the L'Oreal, Standard Chartered. And a lot of what these brands did well is understand why they need to be there. But, you know, within the mix of the projects that we've done, especially last year when it was a bull market and there was a lot more hype, there were also a few brands that jumped in and just wanted to do something for the sake of doing something, or to be first, or to have some PR. And as a result, a lot of those activations, even though maybe they paid off at the time, they're generally not around anymore. They didn't really age well because the reasons were not necessarily long-term strategic reasons. So I think that's really important to jump in for the right reason, especially at the government level. Those projects are going to take time. They're going to involve thousands of people, most likely, and you know, this is going to impact the life of your citizens, right? So the idea is to first figure out the why, and the why could be, we talked about tourism, we talked about you know, digital twin that you can use for simulations, for example, for to predict, you know, sustainability of a city, for example. So there's multiple reasons, but the first step is always to understand what do you want to achieve, and see how the metaverse can be the right tool or the right channel to leverage that. But the real need should come from an actual objective that the country has.
Vitaliy, do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to add, I would say very similar thoughts as Sam mentioned. In my practice, we delivered 100 projects, 100 plus projects, but we pitched for 1,000 plus. And the main difference between this delivered and pitch project is that the project that was not, I would say, not started, they didn't have a business case. And by business case, I'm not saying it's all about business. I'm saying a number of people we can help, number of lives we can save, and how much money we can make. And again, if the company or the government, and again, we're talking about small company, big company like Singapore Airlines or like Far East or like Subaru or even some huge multinational company, if they don't have this calculation in place and they just want to make it for the sake of making it or become the first one in the market, then we usually decline this job, even if it's well paid. I had this cases a few times, I would say this year, including some big projects with telcos, just because they want to do something which we saw would be a fail in the long run. Probably it's a nice gimmick. You can publish a few articles, you can do some nice LinkedIn posts, but in the long run, that would be the gimmick. And this is what we try to avoid. We're looking at the people whose life we can make better, or we're looking at the money which can generate more jobs or more business for the company.
Okay, that's interesting. And maybe that's the next step in the evolution of metaverse businesses, is that maybe we've gone from the bull market mentality of 2022, where I think everybody just did anything because they thought they could make money, versus maybe a slightly more moralistic approach of Vostok, that are kind of saying, listen, there has to be a purpose to it. But I'm curious as to, you mentioned one of the metrics that you look at is lives saved. So do you want to expand upon that? Because that's quite a serious thing.
I would say it's something we delivered for companies like Schlumberger and Petronas. So we created this small scale enterprise metaverses for the companies, so they can do training and they can train their staff how to lift heavy weights, how to work with electricity, And we are talking, again, maybe not thousands of lives changed, but we probably they have like maybe 10, 20 accidents for the whole company, which is tiny number. But even if we can save like this 10 to 20 people, that's a huge relief. And I think that's the ultimate value of virtual reality, of metaverse, because it's something that makes life of these people safer and life of those company better.
Thanks, Vitaliy. And I think that's also a good reminder of the metaverse is not a narrow definition of things. You know, the metaverse is not just the Sandbox. It can be, or Fortnite. It can be there could be business applications, there could be practical training applications, there could be tourism applications, and increasingly as we move forward, commercially viable retail applications. So I think that we can segue almost seamlessly into monetization, which I think is one of the naysayers, people who are not very pro metaverse, often talk about how you don't make money out of it unless you are a builder or an agency that's building things. So I have heard Vitaliy speak many times, and I've heard the likes of Sandbox speaking many times about the current state of metaverse platforms, about being around engagement rather than monetization at this stage. So the Sandbox, for example, is kind of in alpha 3 phase, so still not really fully rolled out. But ultimately, a technology is going to live or die by its business models. So where do you think we are on the journey, and how far away are we from mass adoption? And I know that you may have some perspective on this, Sam, because as you mentioned, you've helped the likes of Amazon, you've worked with a lot of commercial brands, and you do have a monetization aspect to your business as well. So perhaps you can jump in on that.
Yeah, I think it really depends which lens you use to look at metaverse. If we look at only specific platforms, as you mentioned, you know, a few of those, their audience is just not very big. A lot of them are not fully opened, and so it's very, very early stage. But to me, you know, the behavior that the metaverse is basically creating is not new. Gaming has proven that people like to spend time and money in 3D environments if the experience is engaging enough. You know, the gaming market is 3 billion people playing every single day. It's $200 billion spent in game across, you know, power-ups and digital goods. So that's the monetization of the metaverse. The metaverse is just you know, it's using the same technology as gaming for non-gaming use cases. So instead of just playing a game, it might be a social experience, it might be a virtual concert, it might be a, you know, be able to explore a hotel or a place that you want to visit. So that's basically, you know, how we see that. I think the user behavior is already there. It's been conditioned by gaming for the last, you know, 30 years or so, and there's all kinds of tools that have been built, that we have built for e-commerce or advertising, to be able to extract, you know, revenue from those environments and help creators monetize, which is absolutely necessary for them to create a positive ecosystem and give people a reason to build more content, right? Monetization is really important, because without it, there's no incentive to build. And, you know, there's not going to be a metaverse if creators are not able to make money from their creation. So yeah, for us, you know, that's what we're looking at when it comes to the total market size. And when it comes to our own experiences, we are also integrating, you know, different ways to generate revenue.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Actually, I want to ask one more question, but just to remind you, we've got some questions coming in. So if you do have questions for either Sam or Vitaliy, then please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And Sam, I also wanted to ask around the monetization, because I believe you were involved in a Metaverse Fashion Week project, which I believe that had some direct monetization models around. So can you dive into that a little bit, because direct monetization rather than kind of like gamified or in-game kind of monetization is even rarer. So do you want to share a little bit about the learnings from that kind of event?
Yeah, absolutely. So the event was the Fashion Week 2022. And I'll talk a bit about 2023, which just happened after that. So 2022 was the first Metaverse Fashion Week, happened in Decentraland, and this was, you know, this was in the height of the bull market. There was a lot of press. Vogue covered it. A lot of influencers covered it. It was a decentralized event, so we were not the only builders, but we contributed to bring several brands. 60 brands were there: Tommy Hilfiger, L'Oreal, and various other, you know, fashion and makeup brands. And basically those brands had a little shop that they had to pay for to reskin the shop, and from that shop they could sell virtual goods. And there was also a fashion show which was showcasing the different products to the audience. Over the 3 days, the festival attracted about 300,000 people, and it generated multi-million dollars in revenue. I think 2.5 directly from users who were buying virtual goods. So it was digital, you know, basically NFTs of items and things they could use on top of their avatars, or to reskin their characters within the experience. So that was, you know, a huge amount of money generated for a fairly small amount of people. Over 70% conversion rate on the digital items, which obviously is not a traditional conversion rate. If you look at, you know, an e-commerce website, you're probably on 3 or 4%, and that's already if your website is really well optimized. So 70% is very much out of this world when it comes to conversion rate. And of course, a lot of that could be attributed to the fact that this was the first version. And so a lot of people were excited. They were coming there with, you know, the intent to buy. This was not just a bunch of random people joining in. This was all, you know, a group of early adopters that were ready to buy. The average person, when they logged in, had about $25,000 in their wallet. So also quite, you know, high spenders, not your average audience. So that was quite interesting. And obviously we knew that this was not, this kind of conversion rate would not sustain over time. And this year there was version 2 of the Metaverse Fashion Week. And at LandVault, we decided not to be a part of it this year because the platforms, unfortunately, did not really improve any of the experience. So last year it went well, but there was also a lot of, you know, feedback around the user experience and what brands were expecting. And we're hoping that a year later, the capabilities would allow just something better. Because selling that to brands as a first, it's something, but when it's the second, you expect more utility. You expect, you know, the platform to has evolved, and it hasn't. And this year the numbers weren't great because it's a different market. You know, users have less disposable income. They may be less excited about, you know, spending money on virtual fashion for the first time. So the novelty has kind of worn off, and so the result this year were not that good. And so, you know, that's one of the issues when things are mainly driven by speculation as opposed to true utility. But, you know, it was a very successful event last year when it came to actually driving revenue. We've, you know, proven that this is something that can happen, and under the right condition, brands can actually make money from those events.
Fantastic. That's interesting, and also very interesting learnings, because I think there's always this kind of bull market, bear market attitude in the Web3 and the metaverse space. So Vitaliy, you're active in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. You've done more than 100 projects, like as you explained a little earlier, some B2B, some B2C as well. So what's your perspective on this? So are we engagement, are we monetization, or is monetization far away?
I just want to add to what Sam mentioned about large-scale events and maybe entertainment, music concert. We worked on a concert with Sony Music in Dubai, and this was delivered in fortnight for Mohammed Hamake. And most of you probably never heard about the guy, but he's a big pop star in Egypt with like 15 million followers. And within 3 days, it's something unofficially what Sony Music shared with me. We managed to get 9.5 million people into this space, which is 3 times smaller than Travis Scott big performance, but still 9.5 million. If you ask me, like Red Hot Chili Peppers in Singapore, Billie Eilish in Singapore attracted about 30 to 40,000 people. So now we have 9.5 million people for the local star. So the question is like, how are you going to monetize it with its digital collectibles, whether it's avatars, whether it's something else. So I think this is something new, and this question needs to be asked by brands. But again, there is a big potential to create audience and very high engagement. My experience in B2B tells me that it's very, I would say, it's easier to justify the project. For instance, Microsoft predicts that 85% of the sales communication by 2025 will be done online, digital. It's almost 9 out of 10 sales talk will be done either through Zoom or Teams. I'm not sure how about you, but I don't like Zoom and Teams like any other. I just don't have much, I would say, much tools at my disposal. And we have a customer in Saudi Arabia, and this is, we are doing a pilot now, who approached us and tell us, like, we have a factory which is 500 kilometers from Riyadh. How we can show it to the potential investors? And we are talking about companies who want to spend like $50 to $100 million. And now we're creating a digital twin of this factory, which is based like 500 kilometers from Riyadh. So the business owners or the companies, they can visit and they can understand. So it's not Zoom, it's like a digital environment where you can access it either through the web or through the virtual reality headset, and you can walk through the factory. And it sounds a bit utopian, but again, I tried myself on different projects, on different developments. For instance, we delivered this Subaru experience, a showroom experience for like 12 cars, including some safety features. And you know what? I'm probably the biggest fan of Subaru right now, just because after working on this product for 6-12 months, I understand how safe this car is. And again, the digital twin is one of the potential use cases. And again, how to justify it? It's very easy. If they can attract one investor who invests $50 million, that's justified probably 10 Metaverse projects we can deliver for them. So I think in B2B it's slightly easier to justify. In B2C, definitely we need to look for some revenue models, but yeah, definitely look for business case.
Okay, so again, interestingly, two slightly different perspectives, in the sense that Sam was talking a little bit about the fashion industry. Vitaliy talked about the entertainment industry. I know that one of the definite signs that this area is growing is that the global leaders in how you commercialize entertainment, the K-pop industry, is really getting into the metaverse as well in a big way. So are there any other trends that you guys see, maybe on the retail or the consumer side, that people are getting into? And actually, I'll throw this to Vitaliy first, because I think that one of the interesting things is there's 2 huge trends at the moment. One is metaverse and one is AI. So Vitaliy was sharing that he's managed to do an experiment where he's integrated ChatGPT with his metaverse project. So is that an area of potential future commercial exploitation?
Yes, ChatGPT is definitely lots of hype about it, and I was surprised because I have about 2,000 connections on LinkedIn, and probably within last year I got like almost 100 of my connections become Web3 experts, and now like half of them moved to generative AI expert. So it's funny how things changing much. So again, there was lots of hype, and lots of customers ask us like, Vitaliy, can you show like how ChatGPT works with Metaverse? Because everyone talks about it, but we never seen it. So I asked my team, I asked my CTO, within 5 days, we done the MVP. We showed to the customers. And again, it's we have a demo, and it looks, I would say, for me, it looks basic now. It definitely shows the true potential. The way I see it, and we have few ongoing discussions with the customers, the way I see it, ChatGPT is just the search engine which kind of can provide you some really advanced answer. And what if we can create a virtual or metaverse assistant 2.0 when you can ask the ChatGPT or like any generative AI some question regarding the specific brand and specific product or service, and this metaverse assistant can provide you a 3D visual for this product or service. I can give you an example with Subaru, for instance. What if you ask, like, I have a family of 4. I have 2 small kids, and we like to travel to Malaysia. What car can you offer? And ChatGPT tell you, actually, Subaru Forester, the latest model, will work for you because it has this 3 particular feature. Do you want to have a look? Yes, please. And then either in VR or in the web, you can see all the features, all the safety features. And at the end, it will tell you, by the way, we have a promotion. Do you want to have an actual test drive? We actually have free time tomorrow at 12. So this is one of the, it's not like ultimate promise, but this is one of the stepping stones of utility, because everyone talks about ChatGPT, but honestly, I mean, how many of you done business plan using ChatGPT or like marketing communication? Sometimes I do decks or slides myself just because kind of it's easier for me. I'm not generating a lot of generic content. But here we see some of the stepping stones in this direction, because Metaverse Assistant is the one who will work 24/7 and can speak up to 95 languages. So imagine 24/7, 95 languages. And this is where I see one of the potential promises of Metaverse. This is the direction of where we're going. So when some people ask me, like, generative AI, Metaverse, are they competing? No, they actually complement each other, and working together, we can make something really great.
Okay, thanks for that, Vitaliy. It's very interesting. As somebody who started their career at the BBC, I feel compelled to point out that there are other car brands available, and they may or may not be on the metaverse at the moment. But I think it's an interesting development to see that maybe generative AI could essentially become a very smart virtual assistant in the metaverse world. Sam, over to you. I mean, do you see any emerging trends, like maybe more on the commercial retail side? Maybe you have some thoughts on, how generative AI can integrate with the metaverse as well?
Yeah, I think as the metaverse is moving from the phase of hype into more utility, a lot of clients and also consumers are trying to figure out what is the metaverse going to be for me, and what is the actual use case. When it comes to customers, so people actually actively paying to build experiences right now, we see 3 main avenues that are really emerging. The first one is real estate. So, basically recreating virtual copies of buildings, mainly for marketing purposes. If it's a hotel, for example, or a landmark that you can visit even if you're not there. The second one is virtual events. So, music festivals. We talked about the fashion festival, film festivals, basically extending events, sports as well, extending events to the virtual world, so that to keep the IP going, and basically create a better relationship with the fans of the event. And then the third one is more at the government level, so digital twin. The digital twin is just the 3D copy, but then that becomes a canvas basically to represent data, and the data could be things around carbon emissions, or simply traffic in the city, water management, and things like that. Once you have the 3D representation, you can use simulations to display those quantities live on top of the real world. So that's these are the 3 main use cases that we see. When it comes to generative AI, we are actually working on a product right now. Initially, we are using it internally for ourselves to basically prototype faster. We do not think that we are yet at the point where we can put that in the hands of a customer, of a big government or brand, and have it build exactly what they want. However, we can prototype probably 50% of the experience using that. So at the moment, it's more of an internal tool, and eventually we aim that to become customer facing.
Well, thanks for that, Sam. And I think you heard it here first. When the world is taken over by LandVault and Vostok VR and the generative AI metaverse hybrids, then this is where the very first announcement happen. One last question before we go into a Q&A, and then maybe a bit of a subjective question. But so we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about government, we talked about tourism, we've talked about commercialization, we've talked a little bit about generative AI. So really you can see that it's a very broad canvas that the metaverse is painting on. So to both Sam and Vitaliy, what is the one thing that excites you the most about where the metaverse is going and the potential of it?
I can take that. So to me, it's if you look at the internet and the evolution of the internet over the past 25 years, obviously the whole industry has, there's billions of websites and thousands of successful companies, but the actual protocol, the way that the internet works, hasn't evolved massively. We had Web 1, which was mainly, brochures on the internet, the ability to consume information. And then really the next big innovation was social media, where you have conversational internet, right? You can read and write. But there's nothing really has been drastically evolving since then. And the companies that are big today are basically the ones that were early in Web 2. And so to me, it's really exciting to see, the next phase of that evolution happening now, which is basically brought forward by Web 3. We see, the metaverse doesn't have to have a blockchain element. It can be a completely centralized experience. But for us, at least at LandVault, that's a personal opinion, the ultimate metaverse definitely has one. Because it is that blockchain that powers new business models around ownership of content. So Web3 is this internet where you can read, you can write, but you can also own the content that you're creating, because it is recorded on the blockchain as an NFT or as a fungible token. But it does give you that element of ownership, and basically users become shareholders in the tools that they are using. So that's quite a fundamental change. It changes the creator economy around it, which becomes more of an ownership economy as opposed to attention economy, and creates all kinds of business models that are just not possible on the internet today. And these are the tools that LandVault is building, which will spearhead and supercharge the next creator economy. So that's really what we're excited about. In addition, just having a more immersive, more interactive internet. I think the history of media has shown that we've always tried to convey information and tell stories in more immersive ways, starting with text, and then we had pictures, then we had videos. The next step is a 3D immersive experience. And I think obviously it won't apply for everything, but there are a lot of things that we do on the internet today that are fairly experiential and that could, benefit from a more immersive experience. So those trends are kind of colliding, coming together, and we believe that the metaverse is the final product.
Fantastic. I mean, I think to sum up, democratization of the internet, I think, is a big, exciting use case for Web3. And I think that's really the metaverse is one of the areas that's driving more towards the equitable solution side. There's the brand promise, if you like, of Web3. So yourself, Vitaliy, what's keeping you awake at night in a good way?
I always take, because it's my business, I always take things personally, because I believe you need to believe in what you do. And for me, the big call, a big change was probably 1.5 years ago, when I started seriously investing my time and effort in Metaverse, when I saw my daughter and she was playing Roblox. And my first intention was to stop her and to prevent her from playing. And she was building a small house, like in a Roblox. And I realized that probably that's the future life of where she lives. That probably her job in the future will be, she will be doing some virtual fashion, and she'll become a virtual fashion designer, or she'll be building the metaverse houses in the future. And even now I'm thinking about like, do I need to think about a university, or whether are we going to have any universities in like 10 years when she graduates her school? So I think the big change, the big thing that excites me, that within next 5 to 10 years, we going to have a huge shift towards digital, and definitely going to enhance, improve our lives, create new business models, create new job opportunities, and eventually I truly believe that it will make people happier. And I should say that when like as a final words, when we start doing Metaverse, and I mentioned this, there was a huge circle or like bubble of people who talk about Web3. There was a smallest circle of people who understand Web3, and there's tiny dot of people who actually do Web3. So what happened since this year, that this big bubble moved to generative AI, and we left with this small circle of people who actually do care and do some business models, some business cases in Web3. And I just believe and hope that together we can build a brighter future for us and for our kids and for the humanity.
Well, thanks for that, Vitaliy. And I think interesting that you touched upon something that we didn't touch upon at all, which you know, showing how broader canvas the metaverse is, which is education, because I think there's a lot of use cases and application for education, and maybe the future of universities isn't a physical space per se. Okay, thank you so much to both Sam and Vitaliy for a very interesting discussion. We're going to answer a few of the questions that have come from the audience. We're running out of time a little bit, so we've got time for 2 or 3 questions. So let me just dive in. And Crypto, clearly a Web3 native, says, how can cities and governments benefit from a metaverse presence? Are there any use cases or success stories that have been implemented to date? Because I guess, as we have discussed earlier, you know, a lot of this is in the early stage. We're still in alpha. We're not really full kind of rollout of a lot of the platforms, and they're still in development. So at this stage, are there any really good success stories of cities and governments? I can think of Seoul, but again, that's still very early stage. Seoul's trying to do a lot of things on the metaverse. Whoever wants to answer that, if you feel you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think there hasn't been a fully scaled metaverse at a country level yet that is live and accessible by everyone. That's not live yet, but it has been some small use cases for specific government entity that is, you know, might be using the metaverse, or at least a digital twin for specific use cases. We've worked with a few governments now, but most of the projects are still ongoing. And these are some of the first projects that are meant to actually be a consumer product, right? Tourism, as we discussed. Whereas a lot of the use cases in the past were more around actual, you know, internal use for sustainability management, for example, and other type of simulations.
I should add that the government are sometimes more conservative because more thinks it's risk. But we have some customers who can be considered as a small city, so a small government, with number of employees of like 50 to 100 to 150,000 people, and they have implementation of different enterprise metaverses. So I just think that it's coming to the government, but we shouldn't be just restricted on the government, because if the company, like multinational company who has like 50 to 100,000 people using it, that's kind of a small government. And I mean, there are multiple cases like this. Again, we are talking about oil and gas. They start implementing this solution for their training, for their social function, for their interaction, communication, because they understood how fragile their business and their connection during the COVID, especially in Middle East. And yeah, I would say don't just focus on the government, because I think we will find out at the very last stage that the government do something. But we have a lot of business cases and companies around the world implementing these technologies.
Okay, thank you. A question from Shin. Quite a heavy one, but generally a normal common question in Web3 conversations. As the metaverse grows in popularity, questions about regulation are becoming increasingly important. How do you see the metaverse being regulated, and what are some of the potential implications of this regulation on development and adoption? Heavy question. I don't know who wants to take that.
Yeah, I mean, I think regulation should be similar to what's on the internet. The metaverse is nothing new. It's a three-dimensional, version of the internet. So when it comes to privacy, I suspect that countries might have different ideas and different ways to regulate that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because from one side I want to create some new innovative business model and like do the things and then decide whether it should be regulated or not. From other side, I see that different countries acts differently, and I can compare between South Asia and Middle East. I see at least at this stage a bit more freedom in Middle East, but again, it's changing almost every 6 to 12 months.
Okay, and finally, the last question. It sounds like metaverses are akin to malls, and the different ones are trying to get different brands and experiences into their malls to increase traffic, which I think is, yeah. This is more suitable for B2C brands. What are some of the benefits and opportunities you've seen from B2B brands being in metaverses beyond just marketing? So I think you were touching on this extensively earlier, Vitaliy. So maybe you can go first.
No, definitely. I can simplify it because when some companies or some investors or some brands asking us like what kind of products or projects you do, it's very hard kind of to divide all 100 projects in different categories. So I created two specific categories. One is nice to have projects, and second is must have. So nice to have for us, it was mostly some activation project, some marketing campaigns, some showcases, like we delivered recently the project for Singapore Tourism Board. Can they survive it? Like it was delivered from the central, and can they survive it without it? Of course. I mean, they will launch some TV commercial campaign and so on. But must-have project is something where I see huge potential. And I told about the enterprise metaverse, which saving lives, because they use them to train their staff in order to not to be killed by electricity. That's probably a bit extreme, but how about education? What if we can offer a high-quality education somewhere in Africa, in countries, let's say, not every person in, even like in South Asia, if you go to Indonesia, Philippines, imagine if you can offer a Harvard-like degree for the people who live there, so they can become a trained surgeon, or they can get their skills. I would say that will open huge opportunities. So that's why I believe that malls, it's very primitive and basic vision of metaverse. Again, this is something what you can see on LinkedIn, people posting all these case studies and success stories. Just try to be more, I'll say, specific, try to look for some interesting cases outside of this LinkedIn, because there are many multiple cases. It's just they are not popular. And let's be honest, we work on some very interesting project. We never actually mentioned this or like publicly mentioned, because we want to build some product or solution based on this and become the pioneers on the market. So that's why you hear of the most obvious project, but there are many different layers underneath. It's like iceberg. You can just only see the tip, and the tip is the mall, but underneath it, there are a lot of useful and practical use cases. Some of them are available now. Some of them will get available within the next 6 to 12 months once the hardware will catch up.
Okay. Thank you both to Sam and Vitaliy for sparing their precious time this morning. I think we've all learned quite a lot, actually, especially around the government side. So really boils down to currently tourism, but then the use cases will expand. But as with anything, and it's not really something that's never been done before, the basics of find out your why, understand the utility and things will work. It's not groundbreaking in rocket science, but it's amazing how few people adopt this approach sometimes. And that I think monetization is something that is starting and will progress as the use cases get stronger and more robust. So again, it just leaves me to thank both of you for those valuable insights. As we advance to the next phase of the digital age, we're very much looking forward to these exciting developments in the metaverse and your generative AI projects, and the different way that brands, cities, and governments can connect with the audience. So thank you, Vitaliy and Sam. I'm Adam Flinter, managing partner of Golden Equator, and it's been my pleasure to moderate this panel session. If you do want to get an invite to our business connection and communication tool, Swish, again, we've just flashed up the QR code. You can scan it and get an invite and join our Swish community, where we will be hosting these kind of events regularly, as well as other engagements. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.